Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends. Welcome to the ad hoc conference entitled The Right of Blasphemy. This is our second conference, and I would like to thank and welcome everyone for coming. I would especially like to thank our guests who have accepted to come and debate this question, which still remains taboo in our societies. This conference will be focused on blasphemy. In our first discussion panel, moderated by Renaud Girard, we will discuss whether Islam can be reformed in the presence on international of anti-blasphemy laws. And in our second discussion panel, moderated by Alexandre Delval, we will discuss if blasphemy is essential for Islam's survival. On behalf of all the members of ad hoc, we welcome you and encourage you to have an open and a frank discussion without taboo. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very happy to be here with you in Roma. My name is Renaud Girard, it's French, and I am the Foreign Affairs correspondent and columnist of Le Figaro. Every Tuesday I publish a Foreign Affairs column in Le Figaro. I've been a war reporter since 1984, which of course brought me to a lot of Muslim countries. I can say that I covered all the wars in the Muslim world for the last 35 years. And I've been asked by Rwanda to moderate this conference, and I'm very happy. I think it's very interesting. I think I will learn, like you, a lot of things. I'm going to introduce our guests and to tell you, we have three guests. Each of them will speak for 15 minutes so that we can have also a dialogue between themselves and with you, with questions. So our first guest is Nadia Oweidat. She's from, I hope I pronounce well, she's from Jordan. I can watch her page. She writes at the same time in English and in Arabic. I'm quite impressed. Nadia has a PhD from Oxford. Her PhD doctorate was on challenge to reforming Islamic thought in the Arab world, and it will be the subject, the matter of her conference, of her speech. She is currently teaching in famous Georgetown University in Washington, of course. And then my second speaker is Elizabeth Okazi. Okay, my pronunciation is great. Oh, Okazi. Okazi. Elizabeth is Irish from the Republic, and she made a PhD in the London School of Economics. She is a specialist of international ethics, and she's currently director of advocacy in an NGO called International Humanist and Ethical Union for Free Thinking, what we call in French les libres penseurs. And maybe she will explain you a little bit what she's doing. And she's also an advisor to the foundation of Raif Badawi. You remember all who is Raif Badawi? but real one, you know. And because he had started a political blog and, you know, asking some questions about Islam, but of course Elizabeth would talk about that. And Raif Badawi had already been given 50 lashes, so there's still 950 to be given. Of course, there was an international outcry, and a foundation has been settled by his wife. I think he has 3 kids, a wife and 3 kids, if I remember well. Elizabeth is an advisor to this foundation. The third speaker is Niccolò Figat-Talamanca, is the only Italian in this board, in this round table, and is the head of a Brussels NGO called No Peace Without Justice. And he will talk about the freedom from religion, which is a new concept, because everybody knows freedom of religion, which is, in the, for instance, in the Déclaration des droits de l'homme et du citoyen of 1789. But he will talk to us about freedom from religion. So this is our program, and our session will finish at noon for a coffee break. So, Nadia, you have the floor for 15 minutes. You can either talk from there or from my microphone as you wish. Okay, but I will be very severe for the time. Please look at your time. As you wish. What suits you the best? Where do you feel comfortable?
The microphone there is better.
Okay, so go on, please.
Thank you, everyone, for showing up this morning. And thank you so much, Randa, and thank you, ADHOC, for putting together this panel and inviting everybody. It's a privilege and an honor to be here and to talk about a subject that is so important. It used to be our local subject, but now it is a global subject, which is reforming Islamic thought. So in my talk, I'm going to try to address 4 questions. One is, what are the obstacles to reforming Islamic thought? And number 2 is, how do we deal with attacks in the Muslim world, blasphemy laws, and outside attacks of Islamophobia, for example, anytime somebody wants to address this question. And I will also talk about how the American administration deals with this issue. And finally, what can we do to address this phenomenal problem of reforming Islamic thought?
Mohamed, est-ce qu'on entend bien au fond de la salle? Mohamed, on entend bien au fond de la salle quand elle parle? C'est excellent? OK.
So I will start with talking about the challenges to reforming Islamic thought. Truly, the greatest challenge is these blasphemy laws. So it's not whether Islam can be reformed or not, it's what are the obstacles, and the biggest obstacle by far is these laws. Because any time an intellectual attempts to address the grievances and the clash between what used to be okay and what cannot be part of the modern world, these intellectuals are silenced in the name of blasphemy laws. So you might have heard of Nasser Hamid Abu Zaid. He's an Egyptian intellectual who wanted to wed modernity to Islam, who wanted religious institutions to play a more constructive role. And he was deemed an apostate for that attempt. And he had to flee Egypt. to save his life, and that is unacceptable for an intellectual who's Muslim, a practicing Muslim, but this is how limiting these beliefs are. But this practice goes back actually for hundreds of years. Early in the 20th century, there was another scholar who was actually at Al-Azhar. So these blasphemy laws, not even intellectuals within Al-Azhar, not even religious authorities are safe from. This scholar is Ali Abdul Razak. And what Ali Abdul Razak wrote is a book called Islam and the Foundations of Rule, in which he basically argued that we don't want a caliphate, that a caliphate is not a system that is conducive to prosperity or human rights. This is coming again from a judge at Al-Azhar, the equivalent of the Vatican for the Sunni world, and yet he was fired from his position. He was never allowed to hold another position all his life because of this argument. So how, if the people whose bread and butter is to produce a thought that can take us to the next phase in evolution, if these people are silenced through these laws, how are we as a culture can move forward? And it's no longer just our problem, it has become a global problem, because this stagnation is spilling over the entire world. It's destabilizing not only the Middle East, but also Europe is seeing the effect of this. So this is the first obstacle. The second is, and this is perhaps why the religious institutions refuse to have this debate, is that there are a lot of sacred texts that are really difficult to read differently. There's a lot of direct texts that are, sanctioning rape, sanctioning killing, beheadings, cutting heads and hands, and beating women, and this is directly from the Quran. So how do you deal with something like this? You can say, this is a challenge that a lot of even these intellectuals face, is that you argue, for example, that Islam is 100% compatible with human rights as we have arrived at them in the 21st century, but in fact, your argument is not backed by sacred text, whereas when ISIS makes an argument, they have a lot of sacred texts. But just because the text exists, does that mean we have to do what's in the text? But it does make it harder, because you can't as effortlessly quote verses that are completely conducive to 21st century human rights, which again humanity arrived at after much trial and error. So this is a second one. The third is really a cultural problem. So I am from a Muslim community, so I'm going to speak about my community, if I may, and of course, every single one of us is a spokesman for their own experience, so I do not by any chance represent the entire Muslim community. There is as many Muslim communities as there are maybe Muslim people, which is a lot. So, but there's quite a bit of insensitivity to violence internally in the culture, which again, it's spilling over. So to give an example, if you have things that are legal like honor crimes, that is a culture that says it's okay for you to kill your daughter or your sister because she has a heart and she fell in love. How outrageous, how unacceptable. And you can kill her. That is a lot of violence. Or that you can force your children, your daughters, to wear a scarf when she doesn't want to. So I actually was one of these people that was forced to wear it, and it was really every single day my dream was to take off that piece of slavery from me, because I didn't choose it. And I'm writing a book actually right now to basically introduce the world to the people in the Arab world that are presenting solutions to our challenges from within using the internet, social media. And I meet a lot of young women who are doing a great role, and many are still wearing the scarf even though they hate it. That is an act of violence. So how do we as a culture really become sensitive to violence internally among each other before we are sensitive to it externally from the other? So we have an overinflated sensitivity, what the other does to us, but not so much internally, and that is an imbalance. So how do we tackle this cultural issue? And the challenge is that the producers of culture are silenced also because of these blasphemy laws. It's very easy to silence anybody in the name of insulting Islam. It's very broad, it's not specific. And this is tied to the next reason, which is authoritarianism. So authoritarianism, and it plays a really big role because they silence producers of culture. You know, when Jamal Abdel Nasser came to power, the first thing he did is fire whom he saw as Western influenced professors like Taha Hussein, the father of culture in Egypt, and stopped the translation schools and closed many theaters. And so that strangling of culture has an effect on us. Culture is a venue to really work at sensitivity. And authoritarian figures and terrorists understand the power of culture, which is why they do not allow it. ISIS or any extremist would never allow you to have theater and dance and movies and stories, and because it's an expression of sensitivity and it dignifies your individual humanity, and that goes against extremism and authoritarianism. So another obstacle actually is Islamophobia, and I'm talking about real Islamophobia. There are unprecedented attacks against Muslims in America as of this year. So that makes it really hard to talk about anything related to internal debate, because the lines are really blurred. So there's so much sensitivity anymore that if you just quote something that happened, a historic incident, and it happened, and it's documented in the Quran and in all the heritage, but it's not very flattering incident, then right away you're accused of Islamophobia. So this actually dishonors the real people who face attack. Like in Kansas, there was a militia that planted a bomb in a mosque recently. So when we use that term lightly against anybody who wants to have an internal debate, we really dishonor those who are really threatened, but also contribute to the problem, because unless we have a debate, unless we push the envelope, how are we to move forward? What makes Europe different is the ideas, is the thinkers like Voltaire and Spinoza, and we're not allowed to have these in the name of in the name of insulting Islam. So this is, I'm happy to elaborate on any of these reasons, but this just gives you an idea. So how do we I want to talk about the administration in the US. Since I work in the US, I worked in the policy world, first at RAND and now at New America. So, you know, any American administration, most likely, I mean, Trump is the exception perhaps, does not want to be controversial. It doesn't see that it's its place to go talk and mediate between Muslims or to tell them. So of course they would rather be out of this debate and just, you know, say what is respectful, what is honorable, because it doesn't feel like it's place to tell people what is Islamic, what is not, although it has to some extent. But that said, there's undeniable sympathy towards Islamists that I have felt personally in my entire tenure of being an analyst in Washington, is that I am constantly accused of being not authentic enough because I'm not an Islamist. So somebody has decided that if you're from the region, and it doesn't matter, like I come from the biggest tribe in Jordan. My tribe goes back to the time of the pharaohs. If you're ever in the British Museum, the burials of Bani Hassan are still there. But that doesn't make me authentic because I'm not religious. I'm not Islamist, not just not religious, I'm not Islamist. So I've had this accusation, and it's really irritating. Who has decided that unless I'm an Islamist, I'm not an authentic voice from the Middle East? Who has ripped me of my right to be? I mean, it's not even a right, it's just a fact. It's like telling Americans, unless you're Christian, you're not American, or unless you were white, you're not American. It's very insulting. But the West, especially in America, it's really, they're not aware of this insensitivity. And we have to fight this, because this sympathy is really costing the entire world, because there's a huge imbalance in siding with Islamists as authentic. And political Islamist parties have proven over and over that they are very authoritarian, and There's enough of us in the Middle East that are really sick and tired of authoritarianism. We would like to see real human rights. We'd like to see real engagement. We want to play a role in building our countries. And we're excluded from that engagement. And Islamists, like authoritarian regimes, exclude everybody who doesn't carry their vision. It's not even a vision, their narrow-minded ideology. So this really needs to be tackled, and how we tackle it is that we continue to speak up about this issue. And the more violence, you see extremism being exacerbated. In the last, it's worse every single year because there's denial in the connection between blasphemy laws, between this imbalance in speaking only to a certain voice from the region. And this is causing the problem to really become worse and worse every year. So what can we do about it? So number one is to really do what ADHOC and Randa is doing, is to continue to push for this issue and continue to put it in the agenda. Because it's no longer an internal debate that we can't be in the middle of among Muslim communities. It's a global concern. And people need to be able to contribute to Islamic thought, need to be able to challenge a lot of the taboo issues, and even to be non-Muslim. This is their innate right. We have to push for secularism because secularism is the right for everybody to believe whatever they want. It is not the right to not be religious only. It is the right for Sunnis to be Sunnis, for Shia to be Shia, for whatever shade and color of faith people want. This is what secularism is, and we have to educate about it. Another thing is to lobby governments in the West, and that all of us that live abroad, a lot of us left our countries because we don't feel free in our countries. We can't contribute, we can't think, we can't, so we leave. So a lot of the best brains are actually outside the Middle East, and that is a treasure that the West needs to cultivate. They've cultivated Islamist voices, actually, in places like England. I remember reading bin Laden faxes from England. So they've allowed Islamists to have quite the space to grow quite healthy, and we're all seeing the result of this, the sectarianism, the violent sectarianism. And they need to really now invest in the secularist, healthy intellectuals and people who really want to see liberal democracies in the Arab world, because it serves the entire world for the Arab world to be healthy, for the Middle East to be healthy. And we need to lobby governments. Governments are essentially people, so we need to really talk to them and present our case and really face that lie that secularists are not authentic enough. Also, philanthropists and wealthy people have a really big role to play. You know, we are in Italy, and the Medici family played a huge role in giving birth to the Renaissance in Italy. We have a lot of wealth in our region, but how many of our wealthy people invest in actually producing secularist culture? A culture that allows for a different voice, for a pluralistic voice. So we need to, again, make a conscious move towards pressuring our wealthy people to invest in the stability of our region. And we have an unprecedented opportunity in our hands, which is social media and the internet. And again, if I may mention my book again, I meet young people all over the Arab world who have impacted millions of their peers using social media, using the internet. So how can we further use this resource to really push for secularism? And I say secularism because, again, it's the freedom for everybody to believe. And secularism and these blasphemy laws cannot exist in the same, you either have light or dark, you can't have both in the same spot. And I'll stop here, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have a question for you. I was quite interested when you spoke about Nasser, Gamal Abdel Nasser, and you said that everybody knows that Gamal Abdel Nasser was not very interested in religion. We all remember his press conference where he makes fun of ladies having a scarf. We all remember that. You can see it on YouTube. So how do you, can you explain us why Nasser, when he came to power in 1953, or the revolution in 52, but he came to power after Negib, why he fires all this, as you said, healthy professors, you use the word healthy. Why? Is there some kind of instrumentalization of Islamic thought by Nasser, though he was not a devout Muslim? Can you just explain that to us?
This is really related to authoritarianism. Authoritarianism and freedom of thought cannot exist in the same space. And Nasser understood this, that he cannot have, Egypt was producing so much culture to the rest of the Arabic-speaking world. It has such a thriving intellectual ambience, and that and authoritarianism cannot exist in the same place. So if he wanted to have control over the country in the way he wants, he had to limit freedom of thought. And Nasser nationalized Al-Azhar. So in 1962, Al-Azhar is the equivalent, it's the far most reputable institution of Sunni learning in the Muslim world, one can argue. And he brought the religious institution under the government wing. So it lost its independence, it lost its, and it became essentially a mouthpiece for the regime.
So this is very interesting because it's a thought of how secular government, authoritarian government, can actually feed, as Nadia told us, feed intolerance and Islamism. This is quite interesting. I mean, for me, it's quite interesting to see how authoritarian regime can feed within themselves, and we had that also of course, in Iraq, in Libya, even in Syria. We had that because in Syria you saw that, when Hafez al-Assad came to power, there were very few students in Damascus wearing scarves. Now most of them are wearing scarves. Okay, thank you very much. Now we will have Elizabeth for 15 minutes, and Elizabeth O'Casey, will have an overview of cases of blasphemy around the world and the position of international law on anti-blasphemy laws in the Islamic world.
Thank
you. You have the floor.
Thank you so much. I want to echo Nadia's comments and thanks for having me here. It's a real pleasure. I thought what I would do, and I apologize if you're familiar with all the cases, but I thought it might be helpful just to highlight a few cases that are happening at the moment around the world in terms of blasphemy, and also just to outline very simply and briefly the international legal context in terms of international law, in terms of freedom of religion or belief and freedom of expression. So just to give you a background as to who I am, I work for the International Humanist and Ethical Union. We're a global umbrella group for free-thinking, laïc, secularist groups around the world. And I lobby at the UN Human Rights Council. And I'm particularly concerned with promoting rights such as freedom of expression, freedom of religion or belief, the rights of women, and LGBT rights. I'm particularly interested in those rights that are threatened by harmful traditional cultural and religious practices. So that's what I do. Actually, and one of my colleagues is Qasim, who's also part of ADHOC. I'm very lucky to have him there. So I thought what I would do is just go over very briefly the current context of blasphemy laws, show some individual cases, outline some problems with anti-blasphemy laws. I'm sure you don't need me to, but I thought I'd just do the theory, and then the international legal context surrounding them. Can you see this okay? Yeah. Okay, great, thank you. So blasphemy laws in the global context. Blasphemy laws are outlined and punished in 6 states with the death penalty. There's 39 states that punish blasphemy with imprisonment, and 15 of those states are members of the Human Rights Council. So we don't need to get into that now, but it says something about the difficulty of reforming laws from the international perspective. Also, it should be remembered that blasphemy is also often used as evidence of apostasy. And apostasy is very badly looked upon by a number of Islamist countries. 19 states punish it, and in 12 it's punishable by death. Another problem is blasphemy is also seen as hate speech or incitement to hatred, because those who condemn blasphemy see it as insulting the followers and not just the ideas, which is something that we certainly dispute, and something I'll go on to a bit later. So just a few examples, and I'm sure you're familiar with them, but I just wanted to remind us all. Obviously, Raif Badawi has had some explanation. I don't need to give you too much. I think he's a very well-known case. And then there's also Nahid Hatta, but his brother, I believe, will be speaking later. So I thought I'd leave that Christian writer who was gunned down, murdered on the steps of a court last month. And another Saudi, well, he's Palestinian, but in jail in Saudi Arabia that we work on is Ashraf Fayed, in the bottom corner. He's a poet, and he was accused of blasphemy in Saudi Arabia. He was sentenced to death by beheading, and then that was reviewed, and now, lucky for him, he's just got 800 lashes coming his way and 8 years in prison. I was lucky enough to be able to read one of his poems that apparently are blasphemous at the UN Human Rights Council, but luckily for me, nothing happened to me. So it says something about Saudi being a member, but lets me read his blasphemous poetry. So there's a few examples in the Middle East. Mauritania I raised just because we work on it, and I think it's not necessarily very well known. And it's a good example of where blasphemy laws, anti-blasphemy laws and apostasy laws are used to silence people who critique the regime. And more we find actually it's not about religion or non-religious belief. It's governments wanting to silence people who are critical of the social situation in the country or the regime. So this, to the left, is Sheikh Mohammed Mkhatir. Apologies for the pronunciation. He is a blogger. He is on death row in Mauritania. That is one of the places that punishes apostasy with death. He was very critical of the misuse of Islam by the government to excuse slavery, which is still a problem in Mauritania today. There's a lot of black people enslaved by people of Arabic descent, essentially. And he is an anti-slavery, anti-racist writer. And he was angry at the idea that Islam should be used in that way. Likewise, on the right is Biram Abeid. He's the leader of an anti-slavery party there. He burned texts that have been used by the government to excuse slavery. Again, his claim is they're misusing Islam. It's not against Islam, it's that he doesn't want the religion to be used in order to condone the practice of slavery. So he went to jail, but he's out now. He ran for president, so his case isn't as severe as Mkhatir's, who's in solitary confinement since 2013, and 2014, excuse me. He's got an appeal coming up, which we're somewhat hopeful about, but we'll have to keep it monitored. So Egypt, I'm sure again you're familiar with the Egyptian cases. There's many to display. I just chose 3. The first is Karim Saber, who wrote Where is God? Again, it was a critique of the country's situation for those in the countryside who are poor and in undeveloped, underprivileged places. He was asking, where is God then? He was imprisoned, sentenced to 5 years in prison for defamation because of that book, and his sentencing was upheld in 2014. Then there's Karim al-Banna. He's actually on the run. He's evading authorities after being sentenced to 3 years in prison for contempt of religion and insulting the divine. And then there's Sherif Gaber up in the corner, who was studying at Suez Canal University, and he was reported to the university by other staff and students. They said he'd made posts on Facebook supporting atheism, and he had a page called The Atheists, also in hiding. Pakistan, I'm sure you know, in terms of the death sentence they've sentenced since it was brought in. 1,000 people, over 1,000 people for blasphemy. They've charged over 1,000 people for blasphemy. There's still dozens of people on death row. There's an effective moratorium there at the moment, but there's always calls to have that repealed and make sure that the death sentence is actually used in practice. Asia Bibi is a very famous case, a Christian who used the same water bowl as a Muslim. They got into an argument and she was claimed to have insulted the Prophet Muhammad. She's still in prison and still facing death. Fawzia Ilyas, I highlight here just because she runs an atheist and agnostic, or she did, run an atheist agnostic society in Pakistan with 3,000 members. And the existence of that only was apparently evidence enough for blasphemy. Her child was, or sole custody of her child was given to her ex-husband, who's devout Muslim. She had to flee because then the court was going to press charges against her. She, last year, came to the Netherlands, where she's now seeking asylum. Junaid Hafiz was a visiting lecturer in English in the Punjab province. He was arrested and jailed for blasphemy after Islamists claimed, without any evidence, that he had insulted Prophet Muhammad on Facebook. There's no evidence, yet he's still in jail. And then his lawyer representing him, who actually had to do the case in jail because of the death threats against his client, also received death threats. They reported it to the authorities, saying that his life was in danger too. The authorities did nothing, and he was then murdered in his office. So just some problems. I mean, obviously, I've given you some cases. Anti-blasphemy laws are not nice, but just in terms of theory, there's a few fundamental problems, regardless of what you think the punishment should be with anti-blasphemy laws. The first is they protect religious beliefs and practices, institutions and leaders from legitimate and often necessary criticism. I guess that's what I was trying to highlight with the Mauritanian case. Often when a government allies itself with a religion as well, when you're found to be criticizing that religion, the government, you're also seen as criticizing the religion completely unfairly. There's a conflation of responsibility. And it protects ideas and not people. This is really key. Defamation laws are supposed to be targeted at people. Ideas don't have human rights, people do. So whilst obviously hate speech is outlawed, incitement to hate is outlawed, it's very dangerous to ever outlaw criticism of ideas. They're intrinsically bad and subjective. Who knows what blasphemy is, which religion should have it? Expressing one religious belief could quite often be blasphemous in another religious belief. Offence is a very subjective term, so they're very difficult laws in general to do fairly, basically. They also create a climate of vigilantism and mob violence. In Mauritania, for example, when Sheikh Mohammed Katir was charged, there was people in the country who offered, imams who offered money in order for someone in the public to kill him. Same as Bangladesh. I haven't gone into that because that's mob violence again, but atheists have been hacked to death because the government has been almost complicit, I would say, in doing nothing to defend those who criticize religious ideas. And they violate the human right to freedom of expression. So just very quickly, to go over the international legal position, it's on our side. Blasphemy laws do not ally with the international legal position. So Articles 18 and 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 18 protects your freedom of religion or belief, and explicitly, in a general comment, expanding on that, it protects your right not to believe anything and your right to change belief. And Article 19 expresses your freedom, protects your freedom of expression apart from incitement to hatred. What's interesting as well, on another expansion by the Human Rights Committee, they said explicitly prohibitions of displays of lack of respect for religion or other belief system, including blasphemy laws, are incompatible with the covenant. That means blasphemy laws fundamentally are incompatible with human rights law that pretty much all states, apart from Saudi Arabia, have signed up to. The repeal has been recommended by many at the UN, including the last special rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief. So the bottom line is they contravene freedom of expression, are in violation of international human rights framework. So that's it. I wanted to keep it short. I'm sorry if I spoke too fast, but ask for clarification if you need any, and do keep in touch with us. We have a End Blasphemy Laws campaign that we're trying to highlight. Thank you very much.
Very much. Everybody is very disciplined because you see, you didn't even use your whole time. So we will have a debate. Is there any question for the time being? Nadia? No. No question? Okay, so let's go on. So Nicola, you have the floor to tell us about the freedom from religion.
Thank you very much. Thank you to ADHOC for inviting me. Thank you most of all to ADHOC for organizing this and for your work. I was very, very pleased to have had the chance to contribute a little bit organizationally to the Brussels meeting and I am extremely pleased this time to be able to be here in person. So thank you, Randa, thank you, Ayman, for this opportunity. I would ask the moderator to call me at 10 so that I don't have to look at my watch.
Okay, great.
He can do that for me. My background is in international law. My doctorate long time ago was in that. And I thought I might say something about the international law situation of freedom of religion, but this was exactly what my predecessor covered, so I'm very happy not to go into that. I think it's worth remembering that freedom of religion includes freedom not to profess one. Not just to change one, also not to profess one. And I think that's something that it's relegated to the technical comments made by this or that committee, but I think it's something that is worth bringing back to the fourth of the campaign for human rights. I have, it's been anticipated, I have thought and I would propose to ADHOC that in the context of its overall work for secularism, for modernity, and for reform of the way people think, that we adopt together and that we spread the adoption of expressly in open source, so asking others to adopt without recognition that it comes from any particular source, the concept and the campaign for freedom from religion. It is, by definition, a little controversial as an issue, but because it presents things as if religion in itself was a yoke or something to be free from. But I think if we are explicit to the risk of seeming extreme, then it can contribute to change the narrative a bit. I mean, it was mentioned, my organization is called No Peace Without Justice, and we work in war zones, and sometimes we have cars, you know, the Jeeps with written "No Peace Without Justice" on them as we drive along, and people say, "What, you're against peace?" And it helps. It helps to have a slogan, a campaign that it is a little bit makes people pause. So that is my proposal to ADHOC, that as a wider part of the work, they adopt this slogan and they make it their own and they make it other people's. I think the time is right, not because of the rise in fundamentalism and in violence. I think the time is right because this is a right we used to have. I mean, you mentioned Voltaire and Spinoza, but you had Averroes. I'm sorry, you had Ibn Rashid before any of us had any of this. and the concept of multiple truths. I mean, you had this in the Arab world. Okay, he was Spanish, and the Spanish can claim him, but he was still an Arab leader and thinker, and that existed within Islam before it existed certainly within this environment we're in Rome. I went to school just across the road here at the Collegio Romano, and which was where Galileo used to work, and in fact, the school is the same. Basically, the lab is the same the one he used to work in. And there was no freedom, even as recently as a few hundred years ago. Here there was, and honor killings were legal in Italy until literally a few decades ago. I think in terms of freedom of thought and freedom of thought from religious authorities, I think Islam was one of the world leader until a few centuries ago, and which is, in my mind and the way I grew up in this city, quite recently. So I think we have to reclaim that, and we have to reclaim that not only with reference to Islamic fundamentalism or Islamist policy or politics, but we have to reclaim it also with reference to the, our European, even, people think it's, liberal people think it's legitimate to have laws against genocide denial and Holocaust denial. And we have to think about whether that is reasonable and whether that is a way in which we want the Holocaust to be, and the memory of the Holocaust to be respected and protected. I think in the last 10 years, certainly in the 21st century, freedom has taken a few hits as something that needs to be protected and respected and thought about in policy on a daily basis. And I'm going to give you another, in addition to freedom from religion, I want to give you another thought that I've been working on for a little while. Again, no copyright. And that, which is that rights are not what needs to be protected. What needs to be protected is liberty, is freedom. And the rights exist to protect those freedoms by law. And it's complicated in French because droit and droit are the same word, but I think when we think about rights, we have to think about the underpinning freedom. And that's why there is freedom, right to thought doesn't make any sense. It's freedom of thought, because it's impossible to restrict what people think. But freedom of expression requires a right to free expression. And so as we think about laws and what do they protect, I like very much the idea that blasphemy laws protect ideas and not people, restrict ideas and restrict people. We have to think about what freedoms do the laws protect by creating a right. Now, I don't think there is a legitimate right not to be offended by other people's thoughts. And because there is no freedom not to be offended. So as we think about laws and what they mean and what they do, I think this is it's a useful way of thinking it. And so I offer it to you also as a campaign idea. Freedoms is what needs to be protected. Rights is the way we protect those freedoms by law. Blasphemy laws neither protect freedoms nor protect any right. So I think the connection between authoritarianism and blasphemy is evident. Where there is only one power, there is an attempt to have only one truth. And so it doesn't even require the historical evidence, which is obvious, but even conceptually, I think this is what needs to be fought, which is only one truth, which is what Averroes or Ibn Rashid, excuse my pronunciation, first said, more than one truth. Less than 10?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's brilliant. So this is the way we're going to proceed. Everybody, not only at the round table, can ask questions, and a microphone will be given. You just please raise your hand. And okay, so Nadia has a question. I will ask the first question because I'm the moderator, so I will use my power. So you have been speaking of Averroes. If I understand well, but I am not a specialist, I understand that Averroes was, as everybody knows, teaching in Spain. Was it in Córdoba? Okay, Córdoba. He was teaching in the 12th century, basically. And Averroes, I understood, said that in his teaching, that he was teaching Islamic thought, by the way, that only 2% of the Quran could not be discussed, like, I don't know, like, for instance, that Muhammad is a prophet, like, I don't know, the unicity, God is one and things. But the other parts, the 98%, it's what I've been told, but I would like to check it with Nadia, actually. The 98% was debatable. And he was teaching to his students to debate about it. But then, after him, I would say, like, but Nadia will tell us, 30 years after, or 20 years, there was some kind of meeting of ulemas, and there was some kind of fatwa. We decided that this debate, this possibility of debating Islam, this 98% of the text, was finished. So Nadia, can you tell us about that?
You know, when we talk about antiquities and we talk about the Middle Ages, the debate that was taking place by these intellectuals would get their heads rolling in this day and age because they were so progressive, they were so open to other cultures, other civilizations. They mainly dealt with Greek and Roman and Byzantine and especially Greek philosophy. But they were so open to all that humanity had at the time. And if you read some of what they wrote, when I read it, I sometimes feel like if I had time, I would just take things and put them on Twitter and people and not say who it's from. And I can imagine people saying, this is from a Western Islamophobe, but actually it's from ancient texts. And they push the envelope so much to the extent that you have people even arguing that when you are a philosopher, you don't even need to practice any of the ibadat, any of the rituals, because you can really communicate almost with the divine, like a prophet, that you don't even need, but some people need that. So the level of debate and questioning was so massive, but we've lost that. But these scholars were silenced.
This was in Averroes. This one in Averroes' time that you said that people could not have the rituals, like scholars.
Mean, there were multiple thinkers, including Averroes, including Al-Farabi, and intellectuals like Al-Mutanabbi, which is why he's called Mutanabbi, right? He claimed to be almost like a prophet. But all of these people were accused of blasphemy, were silenced one way or another. So continuously, one thing comes across is that our culture, humanity in fact, loses because of the silencing of this debate. We have lost on so much, and for how long do we have to lose while the other camp, extremist, is growing unhindered? If you want to be an extremist, the road is paved. You'll have money coming, you'll have all sorts of facilitations. If you want to be somebody producing a civilized thought, see how far you can go. You can tweet one sentence, siding with the human rights, and see what happens to you. So, unfortunately, the imbalance continues. Thank you.
So what Nadia told us, which is quite interesting, is that at the time in the 12th century in Spain, I mean, the debate had more freedom than nowadays. It's very interesting. I have another question because I really seek to be more intelligent after this debate than before. Nadia, could you explain us? I've been told that in Baghdad now, there was a thinker, very Puritan, very extremist, called Hanbal, which means the Hanbalite school. But before, Baghdad was very open and I would say liberal and open to other thoughts. Can you just, in 1 minute, the way you summarize the situation in Spain, summarize what happened in Baghdad in the 9th century with Hanbal?
You know, I regret that I'm not aware of exactly what you have in mind. Sorry. Hanbali school of thought? Yes. So I feel like Haytham, is it Haytham is better prepared to answer.
Hello, everybody. So the debate in this period was mainly much more free than what we have today. So, for example, for the Arab philosopher one time, the best debate they have is that who is the better, the philosopher or the prophet? Someone you said, Nadia, which is Farabi, claimed that the philosopher is higher than the prophet, and he has a lot of qualities. For the case of Ibn Hanbal, let's say, is the predecessor of the Salafist, and he claims that there is one truth, and the truth needs to be literally from the text. And he defines the text as the Quran and the said of the Prophet. So he mainly have this view. Also, the other view he has is that the Quran is eternal. The other liberal Muslims were Mu'tazila. They think that the Quran was created, which means that it is placed in the history. So we could sometimes think that these thoughts are, since they are in time, so we could change them and have another view. He managed to be more closer than the Mu'tazila to the common people with the network of the local imams, and he made his fame by this, speaking about a lot of saying that this came from the Prophet and so on, and by fanatizing these people, he became a superpower. So they obliged the Caliph in Baghdad to say, okay, the commoners think like this, so let's eliminate the liberals. And we start from this, that the fanatic point of view in Islam wins because it was more closer than the commoners, than the liberals, who were really protected by liberal, or let's say, des despotes éclairés en français, but not that close to the commoners, because they were so sophisticated and so knowledgeable and speaking about philosophy and logic, which people, I mean, common people doesn't understand and want really something very fixed and very simple, and they were really close to the local imams, which were fanatic and doesn't understand this.
So this is very interesting. We just learned how much a powerful state, powerful laws are needed. And because otherwise, if you have demagogy and you have populism, then you have you don't have the protection of the intellectuals. You need a strong state to protect intellectuals, as soon as, of course, the state does not start attacking the intellectuals like we had, unfortunately, in France with Louis XIV, that protected intellectuals at the beginning and then, you know, made all this attack with La Révocation de l'Édit de Nantes in 1685, not allowing the Protestants the freedom of religion. It's quite interesting. I would like to to ask you, and or maybe whoever wants to answer, because I said I wanted to get out more intelligent. Do you think that the main problem in Islam, the Islamic world, would be this concept that you explained us, that Quran was not written by man, but by God himself? You know, in Christianity, nobody thinks that it's God who wrote the Bible. I mean, everybody knows who. There's one guy called in the New Testament Matthew and Mark, and then the Old Testament called Eli or whatever. And we know that the Deuteronomy is a kind of laws that was asked by the Persians and so on. Do you think that the main problem is that there is this belief, and can you tell us a little bit about this belief that in Islam that it's God himself who wrote the Quran? So who wants to answer? Nadia? Okay. If you want, anybody want to add something?
So this is what I was referring to when I said that one of the challenges to reforming Islamic thought is exactly that, the text. So if the text is really from God, how do you justify God allowing you unlimited number of girls and women to rape, or raping married women? Or so it's really problematic, because there are a lot of verses that are either slavery, that are crimes, that are war crimes sometimes. So this is really troubling. So people say, well, it's only for a certain context. Well, if that's true, why would God allow this atrocity at any time? It's unethical at any time. It's not okay to rape somebody or to have slavery. It offends our humanity, and it could not have been right even then. So this is one of the greatest challenges, in fact, is the text. So a lot of Muslim scholars came close to addressing this. One is there's really a lot of, among those who are really deep into this, there's some doubt that the Quran is really the Word of God, because there's been many versions. And there's a well-known controversial story that Uthman bin Affan, the third caliph, who basically the Quran we have today is the version he preserved. He basically took, at the time, called for everybody to give him his version of the Quran at the time, and decided to unify it. And there was one version that was with Hafsa, one of the Prophet's wives, that was supposedly the most accurate. And he basically burnt everybody else's, and then said, this is it.
So what are you saying is from Ottoman, celui qu'on appelle Ottoman in French, the third caliph, the debate started to be in question and forbidden. Okay.
So this is problematic because Uthman, if you remember, Uthman was not a very popular caliph. He was actually killed by stabbing of the other Muslims. So somebody who was authoritarian. History is very problematic.
Can you just explain us why Uthman was killed? Because maybe not everybody knows.
So this is where even I can get into trouble, have blasphemy laws against me, is how dare you talk about a caliph like he was a human being. We're not allowed to discuss history, our own history. We're not allowed, let alone sacred text. But how can we not? So much of how we live our lives today is determined by this text. Women don't have agency in much of the Muslim world because in the Quran that agency was taken away. So we have to discuss this because it affects our everyday. So Uthman was viewed as somebody who was authoritarian, who basically monopolized wealth and gave it only to his relatives, in breaking with the norm that there's more equality in distributing the wealth from the places that were invaded by Muslim armies. So they asked him to step down. He refused, so they literally stabbed him to death.
So he was not that Rashidun, that well led.
Yeah, now you are on the blasphemy laws list too.
So I have two questions, the gentleman, the lady, and then...
Actually, it's a suggestion. I believe we are a great group of intellectuals, philosophers, and educated people. I would like to continue with that what Niklas said. We have seen religions coming and going. We have seen gods coming and going, whether ancient Egyptian gods, ancient Greek gods, and. And we will see that also the new modern religions will disappear. And I would like to put for this future view and sight this new basis that we should be discuss in the 21st century, in the third millennium, not about how and when and what to accept from Christianity, from Judaism, from Islam, from Hinduism, from Buddhism. This is not really the question. The real question is that we should face for our future as intellectuals, as people that live in a progressive world, how do we organize it to live without religions? Because they have nothing to do in our political, social, and economical lives.
Can I make a comment on this? Thank you. I don't know if this works in the same network as the others. So I'll sit here. I'm sorry, it looks funny to be on a podium here. This is a good compromise. There's one thing that I think my job is to campaign, right? I mean, I'm the head of an advocacy NGO. You know, I stopped teaching more than 30 years ago the law, and no, not 30. Well, anyway, I think one element which we have to reclaim is that whenever people talk about freedom of religion, whenever people talk about intercultural dialogue, whenever people talk about civilizations, somehow this is considered to be the prerogative of religious leaders. So if you want to talk about intercultural dialogue, you put a mullah and a priest and a Buddhist monk, and they have the dialogue, and whatever comes out is considered. Now, for me, this is obvious that if you want to have something about freedom of religion, the last people you want to agree upon is the people who have a vested interest in your soul, you know? In the best case scenario, it will be a division. You know, I take this, you take that, and then a monopoly within whatever they divide. In the worst case scenario, it will be an agreement on who to tolerate, you know? And Mohammed has allowed the monastery in Sinai to be untouched as a sign of you know, his generosity, and there is the concept of the people of the book and all of that. This is what is scary, that the tolerance of one another is considered a positive thing, that the idea that you tolerate, you know, grudgingly, you know, you smell a bit, but I'll tolerate you, is the new level of what is considered enlightened. I think there's a number of ways of going about it, and each will have their own way, but I think reclaiming as an alliance, a dialogue of laïc people across civilizations, reclaiming that as the legitimate dialogue among civilizations, first of all because we're talking about civilizations, and avoiding every time there is the idea of interreligious dialogue, say, hold on, I have a voice too. And this is something that needs to be done systematically, because in the last 10 years, we have abandoned this to the worst possible elements, supported and supportive of the regimes. And at the end, I think the political nexus between blasphemy laws and in general, the idea that you have to, that the state has a role in enforcing an idea is all about the interest of a state, of a regime, of a type of state. I mean, I think the dynamics of power have to be in our mind when we think about campaigning. But campaigning, we have to.
Thank you very much. The lady and then the gentleman. And, can you introduce yourself, please?
Okay, my name is Sarah Shaltut. I'm a journalist and a poet also. I have an answer for the question about Islam. I think the problem in Islam is not the text itself, if it came from God or not. I think the problem is making the text a closed one. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib said that the text is opened and you can find many faces of the small text. But practically they didn't do, they make it closed. The Islamic associations make it closed, like Al-Azhar al-Sharif and so on. And they fight any people who try to get a new way to thinking. Like the troubles they made with Nasr Hamid Abu Zaid and Hassan Hanafi and those, yes, with those names. Okay. I think they put some strikes laws and made it like Al-Hadith al-Sharif, and they can find new laws which is not in Islam by returning to something like Al-Hadith al-Sharif, although it is not, we are not sure that if the Prophet say it or not. Okay, that's all.
Thank you very much. Can you put forward? And then the gentleman. And
about getting back to the...
Introduce yourself again so that we...
I'm Haytham. I'm an engineer and I work in... I'm active in the civil society in France, an association called Laïcart, to promote laicity and secularism in some places in France, which unfortunately it's abandoned in some quartier, you know. I'm from Tunisia. About right now, the ideas of the view of Quran, if we return back to see the 4 centuries, the beginning of the 4 centuries, and we see what were the discussions about the nature of the Quran, it was very rich debate, and really a lot of their thoughts are considered today as blasphemy. Some of them said, okay, the Quran is ancient text, very ancient, and has a kind of a divine nature, so it's absolute in the time, and you should take it as if it is, and it's considered to be good any time and any place. This is the standard what we see right now. The other vision said, okay, the Quran is a divine word, but it's in the history, so it's created, and you could really, have another view if something in time changes, which is we still on the divine word. There's another view which said, okay, the Quran was revealed in meaning to Muhammad, but what is Prophet Muhammad? But what is written in the text is his words. So his understanding. This point of view was not done by someone liberal. It's done by someone called the Suyuti, which was not that liberal, but at the same time he has the courage to say this point of view. So I think that the big problem right now is to tell the Muslims around the world that they need to little bit understand that what is the vision they have, on the standard vision they have, is there is an evolution of it. And there is a good thing to show them about Quran is the good work of François Duroche in Collège de France. He's taking care of the evolution of Quran, and he's studying the scripts, all the scripts. And it shows us that we have a text that evolutes a lot. There was no punctuation, but after there is punctuation, And when you add punctuation, you are giving a new reading. This means that we are not with a text that is completely divine and nothing can change. We have a lot of changes, and the text took at least 2 centuries to be stabilized. And the version what we have, which is very nice, the version what we have is the version of Cairo, which is made in 1928, and all the versions before are slightly different from it. So we have a text that have changed, and nothing standard for it. And we have a lot of people that are studying this text. What we need to communicate to people that it's something dynamic and not static. And when you have people that integrate the thought of evolution and dynamism in their mind, they will be more open and more accepting difference of belief and thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Nadia, I wanted to intervene. Can you intervene from the...
You know, this is such an important point, Haytham, and it brings us back to the blasphemy laws, is that there's so much in the history, there's so much that we need to do inquiry about, including the historiography. There's so much that can effortlessly prove completely different viewpoints, but we're not allowed to go there because of blasphemy laws. We're literally being held captive by these blasphemy laws, but we're not alone being held captive. The whole world, as terrorism manifests everywhere, and we're not allowed to study our own history or debate, or there's no freedom of inquiry, no freedom of publication. Anybody who publishes anything, their life is threatened. But too much is at stake. And this is one aspect. There's really, again, when you read history, when you read these books like Sayuti he mentioned, and so many more, there's rich debate. And we should be allowed to have it. Humanity should be allowed to have it. Thank you.
Thank you. So I have two people that have not talked, and a lady also. So can you introduce yourself?
Maher Gabra, I'm Egyptian, and I am based in Washington, D.C., and I'm with ADHOC. My question is for Dr. Ouadat. So when I used to live in Egypt, as you know, blasphemy laws was prohibiting me from doing any criticism of the religious thought. When I went to the States, and we had this conversation, but I was surprised that freedom of speech, the First Amendment in America, is so limited by the regressive left and the idea that every criticism is labeled as Islamophobic, racist, bigot, etc. So people like Majid Nawaz, for example, and Sam Harris, and many others are targeted and discriminated because of what they do to do any kind of reform. So in the last few years under Obama, we have noticed that this regressive left is on the rise, and the attacks on any reformers is on the rise also. So my question is, what do you expect, or do you expect any difference in the policies in the next administration? We all know that most probably Clinton will be the next president. She has a higher chance to win the elections. So what is your expectation from the next president of the United States dealing with this issue? Thank you.
Thank you for raising this issue. And again, I really face this myself, that I want to contribute to developing thoughts for my own culture, for my own region, and yet I feel that I'm looked at like a traitor. How dare you want to look into this history? Excuse me? When is looking at history banned? And this is by Western academics who are not comfortable with me raising any issue that is not very flattering. What is this? You know, Germany looks into its Nazi Germany. Why Nazi history? So why can't I look into my history, the flattering and the not so flattering? So the West is contributing to the problem in this context. And we need to continue to push to have a freedom of expression, and while honoring that there is Islamophobia, and it's absolutely wrong that somebody should be attacked for their religious beliefs, we also need to be free to look into our own history, and for people to be Muslims, non-Muslims, different sects within Islam. So what do I expect the next administration? Unfortunately, I don't expect much to change, because unless there is really awareness that there's direct completely and direct relationship between blasphemy laws and countering ISIS. Unless you counter, if you want to eliminate all extremists, whether it's called ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Fatah al-Sham, whatever name, you have to tackle blasphemy laws. It's as simple as that. So when will the West arrive at that conclusion? It takes two things. One is the problem is getting from bad to worse, and that will continue to be because there's not this awareness that you need to tackle blasphemy laws. So this could happen, the more people like ADHOC, the more we need to continue to push for this issue because so much is at stake. Too much is at stake for us to say, well, let us just sit and watch the problem get worse and worse every day. So we have a role to play as people who are intellectual, people who live in the West and have the luxury. And it means withstanding these attacks against us because we want to have that freedom of thought, freedom of inquiry. But I don't expect much to change because, you know, if you're a politician, you just want to be elected. And you want to appease your donors. And you want to, it's not as important as it is for us. For us, you know, a lot of us I'm Jordanian American. I really want to see my region peaceful and prosperous. And I have a sentimental stake in this. And so there's more at stake for us, so we have to continue to push and just deal with the discomfort of being attacked by Westerners, by even left, you know, people, even human rights activists sometimes, because they see in every critique an attack against Muslims. There's no definition, there's no distinction in their mind between Muslims and Islam or ideas. If I attack an idea, I am automatically attacking a billion people. That is not what this is about. There's a difference between me critiquing an idea and me talking about a person. And this is not a debate about people, it's a debate about ideas. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It was very, very square. When you attack an idea, you are not attacking 1 billion people. It's a very good summary. I have... I will have the gentleman over there, and with the lady then, and then I will Nina. Oh, you didn't raise your hand. Okay. So can you introduce yourself, please, sir?
Afak Ahmad, de la Syrie, secrétaire général du mouvement de la société pluraliste. Je voudrais poser une question à M. Kassim et Mme Elisabeth en français. Vous pouvez répondre en anglais.
So what is your question? I will translate it from French.
Moi, personnellement, j'ai une mauvaise expérience avec les organismes internationaux.
I have a bad experience with international organizations.
Parce que souvent, elles parlent de protéger les minorités, protéger défendre la liberté personnelle, la liberté individuelle.
Because most of the time they speak of protecting individual freedoms.
Moi, personnellement, j'étais persécuté en Syrie 3 mois à cause de mon avis politique et en Jordanie pendant 1 an et 3 mois à cause de mon avis religieux.
I was persecuted for like 15 months in Syria. Pourquoi vous avez été persécuté? J'ai pas compris.
Parce que j'étais contre le régime Bachar Assad.
Contre le régime, mais it's not related to c'est pas ça n'a rien à voir avec la religion.
Juste, on parle après de l'étape de l'organisme international.
Okay.
Et en Jordanie, j'ai vu plein de gens les organismes internationaux. Ils sont venus en Jordanie, ils ont très bien écouté. Ils ont
all NGOs are in Jordan and they are listened to. Okay. Est-ce que vous avez une question?
Une question.
Yeah.
Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez faire pour protéger les gens du Moyen-Orient qui sont athées, qui sont dans les minorités religieuses, sauf écouter et...
Votre question, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour les réfugiés qui sont...
Sauf les réfugiés. Tous les gens qui sont persécutés à cause de son avis politique ou religieux.
Ah, qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour... qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour... Votre question, c'est qu'est-ce qu'on peut faire pour accroître la protection des minorités religieuses ou des libres penseurs au Moyen-Orient. C'est ça votre question?
Exactement.
OK. Qui veut répondre à ça? OK. Elisabeth first, because she didn't speak, and then...
Slowly. Okay. I think it's difficult, of course, certainly for our organization, which is tiny and very underfunded. But there are a few things that we try to do. On a practical level, we try to, at the moment, our big concern has been with the Bangladeshi bloggers who are threatened with being macheted to death. So we have been trying to get them out of Bangladesh to help them claim asylum in Europe. And I know other groups have done the same. But we certainly have had differences with groups like Amnesty in terms of when we write appeals and letters. Amnesty haven't wanted to talk about them being the perpetrators being Islamist, which we thought was unreal, that they didn't want to mention the religion or the identity of those threatening the Bangladeshi bloggers. So it's difficult sometimes to work with different organizations, but we have been working to get Bangladeshi bloggers out. But in terms of our role at the UN, yes, it's listening, but it's also trying to create an atmosphere of understanding and protecting freedom of religion or belief. I have to insist upon their belief. It took a long time at the UN for people to say freedom of religion or belief. It is not just freedom of religion, it's freedom of thought, freedom of conscience, freedom not to believe, just to believe in general. And it's really important for minorities, as much as for anyone else, that we insist upon this right in conjunction with freedom of expression. So even us, who have very, very limited resources, because we rely on membership from around the world, but our members often don't have enough wealth to give us money, I think it's really important that we create, at least at the international level, if we can't do something for individuals on the ground, we try and foster an environment in which those with no religion or those who want to critique religion are protected and seen as moral agents and agents with rights in the same way of those with religion. And minorities, you get Christian minorities, you get Muslim minorities, you get minorities without religion. We cannot protect those without religion unless we speak up for everyone regardless of belief. I don't care where you get your belief from. It could be the Quran, the Bible, it could be Kant, Immanuel Kant. Je m'en fous. You're a human rights, you're a person with human rights, you're a moral agent. We should treat you equally regardless of what you believe. And that's what we have to, I think, emphasize at all levels.
Thank you. Thank you, Elizabeth. The floor is to Niccolò Figata-Lamonca.
Just that it's important to be aware of the power dynamics. I say this all the time. Just today there is here in Rome a congress of a political party called the Radical Party. Some of you will be familiar with one of the leaders, who is Emma Bonino. And they wanted to have something on the Yazidis. So they wanted to have testimony from Yazidi crimes. And when I heard this, I worried. And I said, I'll do it. And so I volunteered to be the one who organized the session. It's this afternoon in Rome. And why did I worry? Because the crimes committed by Daesh against Yazidis, against other non-Wahhabists, and anybody who has a different opinion from them, is very, very easy in European political context to provide the perfect justification for what the Europeans want to do about Iraq and Syria and about Daesh, which is to say, this is not my problem, this is Putin's problem. And Putin is the only solution against Daesh, because he is the only one willing to invest and put his money and put his weapons and put his army where his mouth is. Anybody else is just words without deeds. Therefore, there is a strong link between the scandal that Daesh creates and the legitimacy of Bashar al-Assad, Putin, and the Tehran involvement. So this is what I said. I'll do it, because I wanted to avoid the rhetoric about Putin to win when we're talking about crimes committed against minorities in Iraq and in Syria. So, not to say that we shouldn't talk about it, saying that we should talk about it, but we should put in context how Daesh is dependent for legitimacy and for its own very existence from the criminal regime of Bashar al-Assad. One is a spawn of the other, more than the book. I know the book is an important component in convincing people because they can quote from the book. But the link between the authoritarian regime, the crimes committed against the people of Syria by the Syrian regime, and Daesh, I think something that needs to be explained and repeated and repeated. In fact, one of the people that came here, and he said he wanted to come here, but then was, and he asked me to bring his greetings, is Astefo, who is a representative, one of the representatives of the Syriac Chaldean community of Syriac of Syria. The point being, those are not crimes of religion. They are crimes of power. So this is where we have to look to affect the discourse, is where the power and how the state power and the power of the lives of people interact between the religious leaders and the state. And I think this is the dynamic that we have to break.
Thank you very much. Madam, can you stand up, please, and introduce yourself? It works, huh? It's my own microphone. It was working. Okay.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sana Matalqa. I'm Jordanian and Italian. I live here since many years. I'm just a normal citizen, as they say. I wanted to ask Nadia. Yesterday, by chance, I saw a video of Muhammad Arkoun. Yes. You know him. He's a fantastic intellectual writer, professor. And he was talking about the decline of the Islamic thought as from the 13th century. And he was explaining why, what happened. And his aim is, obiettivo, come si dice? His aim is to reform, to go back to these centuries as before the 13th century. He's really a fantastic person. And he wrote many books about this because he wants to reform the schools. He's saying about the education, the teachers, to reform the teacher before the curricula. I mean, this is his aim, is to reform the teachers that teach the children for the mentality. Mm-hmm. This is one thing I wanted to talk about. This person, I mean, his books are very important. Yes. I mean, to be distributed or to, I think he got some, I don't know if he got some problems, but he's very diplomatic in the way he speaks. Mm-hmm. He says about secularism, to separate state, but in an indirect way, because he knows, because they think he's an atheist or whatever. Yeah. My question, just a small one.
Okay. So can you answer and tell us again what is the name of this intellectual
Muhammad
from which century?
Algerian. He's Algerian.
Muhammad Arkoun.
Arkoun.
He's fantastic,
Yes.
but he died. I think he died. Arkoun. Just a small thing. Now I will finish. Why we never heard about Mahmoud Muhammad Taha? He was executed.
Arkoun just died 2 years ago.
He was executed in Sudan, 1980, because he dared to criticize the Madaniya verses. Yeah. And he was executed. I mean, nobody talks about him.
You know, there's one of my shocks, in fact, that made me... so I did my PhD on Islamic thought in the second half of the 20th century, because by complete chance, I came across... You know, it's, if anybody speaks, it comes across really much louder because the room may be designed. So if you could bear with us for a little bit. So I'll tell you a personal story that by complete chance in the US, I was working as an analyst. I went to actually buy books completely political in Arabic to have a perspective on my research. And I went to this bookstore called Dar al-Hikmah after the phenomenal famous library in Baghdad. And I had my company's credit card, and I'm a bibliophile. So I literally just got this book, and I got a few that I thought may be relevant. And for the first time in my life, I came across intellectuals like Arkoun, Muhammad Tarabishi, Jabiri, Nasr Abu Zaid, for the first time, and I've never heard of them. And when I started reading them, I thought, wow, we have these intellectuals? How come I never heard of them? Like in the West, everybody knows the intellectuals from Einstein to, because they're on TV, there's a discussion of their ideas, whereas at least in the Arabic-speaking world, we don't know our best brains. We don't know the intellectuals who really have put a lot of thought into these important issues because their books are banned. They're persecuted. It's really difficult to find any intellectual who hasn't been persecuted, who hasn't been attacked, who hasn't been even jailed. So this is, again, where blasphemy laws have to be taken out so we can have this debate. So if we were to start in the 13th century, actually that would be too difficult because the debate back then was so ahead of now that most people want, it's like a computer that you want to put much more developed software from 2016 on a 1995 computer. It'll crash. It can't take it. So our educational system today cannot take the thought of the 13th century. So what we need, you know, you mentioned education, such a key issue, and in fact we should have really thought about it much, much sooner. Our educational system is completely unacceptable. So I went to public schools, I went to Islamic schools, and I met people who do all over the Muslim world. What we are taught does not prepare us to be global citizens. They create the educational system that exists. Naturally, you see the result of that, creates an individual who is at war with the world. An individual that sees in everybody else kuffar, inferiors, infidels, so they're not curious. So the first thing we need to do is reform this educational system. And in Jordan, you're from Jordan and I'm from Jordan, there's an attempt now to reform the curricular, and there's an outcry because there's math there's Quranic verses in math subjects. What is the Quran doing in math? But this is how much there's this hegemonic Islamist I don't know what to call it, to really Islamize everything, but it's harmful for everybody. You believe as much as you want, but you have no right to impose it upon another. And this practice of pushing one version of faith on everybody else, including Jordan has Christians, is not only un-Islamic in some ways. I mean, maybe it's unethical. So what do we do? Yes, we need to reform educational. We need to actually create an educational system that produces global citizens, people who are curious about the other, able to deal with the other, without that sense of fascist superiority. You know, if you Google Qatari educational software and Jews or caliphate, children are taught that the greatest moment in their history is when they were invading other countries and expanding. But if you look into that history,
Qatar
the country.
No, you said Qatar?
Qatar, the country.
Oh, the country, okay.
Yeah.
Qatar, the country.
Yeah. Okay. So, state-sanctioned educational material really produces individuals who are easily seduced by ISIS. Because if you tell a lot of people that the best moment in your history is when you were invading and killing and raping and pillaging, maybe a few would want to apply this history of caliphate and expand and invade, and this is what's happening. It's a natural result of this educational system. What we are seeing is that people who have been taught certain things are applying them. And even people in the diaspora, there's been a lot of controversy against the educational system in a Saudi-sponsored school in Virginia and Washington, D.C. I mean, people want to have a connection to their homeland, so they put their kids in Islamic schools all over the world. Most of them are funded by Saudi Arabia with a certain, you see that everywhere there's Wahhabi schools, there's unrest, there's strife in the communities. Communities that have lived in peace for millennia they now hate each other, fight each other, they want to control women. Like, so why are we allowing this educational system to continue? It's an educational system that creates criminality in some ways. So we have to address this. Again, it should not be, well, it's a private issue. It's not a private issue. If you produce instability for the whole world, it's not your private business to teach war, to teach hate. It's not a private thing. We all pay for it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nadia, and she put the finger on a very interesting thing on Wahhabism, you know, the alliance between Abdul Wahhab, end of the 18th century with the Saud family, and what happened with America. We were talking about Virginia, the Quincy Pact, which is in February 45, Roosevelt on the Quincy ship decided an alliance, a strategic alliance with Saudi Arabia, and he accepted the condition of not even seeing what was happening inside the country and about the ideology. It's quite fascinating that Roosevelt, at the same time, after like fighting a fascist and a national socialist ideology, as you said, and also Japanese expansionism in Asia, after fighting all that, didn't even bother to ask what kind of ideology was in power in Saudi Arabia to make a 60 years pact, the Quincy Pact, which has been resumed, as everybody knows, by George W. Bush in 2005 for 60 more years. Thank you very much. Can you stand up to ask a question and introduce yourself, please?
So, my name is Qasim Al-Ghazali. I am the treasurer of ADHOC, and from Morocco. I live in Zurich. In Switzerland. I would start with a quote from German philosopher Heidegger, which is somehow, I'm not sure if I'm translating that's good, but it's like this, like the problem of theology is interpretation. And I would say the problem of Islam is also interpretation. If we would like to talk about enlightenment, somehow, probably enlightenment, a part of it is reform, but also is a newborn. We need the courage also to be able to point to the Quran itself and discuss it in a new way, courageous way. By the way, we will have today one of our speakers later, Hamid Abdel Samad from German Egyptian, who has somehow started kind of a process in reading the Quran, not the flowery way, that many moderate Muslims somehow try to do, that they come with a verse and they start to say, this verse is actually meant this and that, and it was etc. and etc. Because this way it also gives right to the fundamentalists. What we would call fundamentalists or extremists, it gives also legitimacy to their interpretation, because at the end we are just interpreting a text, and the fact that this text is not clear enough and could be interpreted, that's the problem. And another topic I would like also to ask, after the second war and the Cold War, I mean, dissidents from Russia and dissidents from the ex-Soviet Union were received and welcomed and were celebrated as heroes of freedom here in Europe and in the West. Unfortunately, why don't we also celebrate dissidents of Islam and dissidents of free thought? Why are we all the time have to suffer, first of all, from those who want us dead in our countries, in our home countries, and to suffer also from the West, who sees us as Islamophobes or as bigots toward Islam? This is really bothers me a lot here in Europe. And I all the time talk to my friends who are free thinkers or liberals in Europe, and they have no problem with criticizing the Catholic Church and in making fun of the Pope, etc. And as long as I would quote Voltaire, and I would put it in a context of Islamism, then Voltaire here is also an Islamophobe. And the guy, I mean, we understand, or Rousseau, or whatever guys of the modernity, etc. And that's really a double standard from the West, and double standard from the thinkers even of the West, those people who use it to see us, the Muslims, the Muslim countries, just as one block, and suddenly they are surprised. This is actually even racist. How come someone from the Arab world or from a Muslim would have such opinions and would have been so enlightened? No, you should be okay with your religion. And this is actually really comes in this context of postmodernism here in Europe, and there is no absolute truth, there is nothing like and this is one of our obstacles. So to summarize what I have said, I support all the people who are for interpreting Islam. I consider them to be my friends, but I demand them more to be much more aware of the fact that such interpretations also could not resist the interpretation of the power, the interpretation of the religious states, etc.
Thank you very much to make this brilliant point about dissidents were so popular dissidents were so popular in the Soviet time and not and Islam dissidents are not really heard in the West. I'm sorry, but it's high time I will not conclude. I will ask our three panelists to conclude what they learned from this day, because you know I have a duty. I'm the moderator, so I have to close this debate at 12, and it's already 12:02. So I will ask my panelists to conclude what they got from this morning themselves. So first panelist is Nadia. Nadia, you have the floor.
Thank you for this vibrant debate. I want to conclude with a question for our European friends. There's a lot of people here, including my co-panelist, who is a lawyer. How can you help us? How can you help those in the Middle East or here who want to see our countries thrive with a lot of intellectual freedom and freedom of inquiry? How can you help us here to push the debate even in Europe so that we can have debates about Islam without being attacked? Because we have the right to study and examine our own history. So how can you help us take that phobia, that fear, that hysteria almost, against us having that right? What can you do in Europe? Thank you.
It's been a very valuable and instructive panel for me, and how much I've learned. I think what's come out of it for me personally is to remind myself of the importance of the different levels through which we have to advocate. So there's obviously a big need for education within the Middle East and worldwide of how religion can be positively interpreted. Because there's people who need religion. I would disagree with the idea that we should prepare for a world without religion. I think it's unrealistic. I think it's a need for many people. And I think we have to emphasize educating it and educating people of their religion and how it's compliant. But I also think that there's another level, at, I guess, my level at the UN, where we make statements, where we don't get into theological questions. Religion is not even mentioned. We emphasize a secular discourse where all terms that are referred to are universalist. They're the very universalist terms that underpin our human rights, our equal dignity. And it's at that stage that, so I find it absolutely fascinating hearing the history of Islam and how ridiculously manipulated it has been for people who want to obtain and keep power. But for me, I don't get into theological debates. As I said before, what I find important at that sort of supranational level, at the UN national level, is to include people of religious belief, is to include a plural group. Because I feel we're not going to make change to states and that international level unless we're much more open to people of different faiths and those without faith. So whilst it's less exciting and it maybe seem less honest, it's also diplomatic. And I do think there's different levels. So I guess I've learned, or I've relearnt the different levels and how important it is to have those if we want to make change.
Thank you very much. Nicolo, can you give us a 1 or 2 minutes conclusion of what you learned during this morning?
What I didn't know is how much the fight, our own, let's say, European cultural fight against Islamophobia has a negative effect on your strife. And I think this is important for us who daily fight Islamophobia in our own countries to realize. I think this is important. What I didn't know is to what extent we're still having a debate about what the words in the book mean, and we're not ready for the debate whether the meaning of the words of the book is relevant to how the state interacts with individuals, how individuals interact between each other. I think you've said very well, there's a danger in getting drawn into the debate about the words because you legitimize the words as a source of authority, of state authority. And I think at some point we, and I include myself within you, need to question whether that is a good direction or not a good direction, and whether it's useful to say something else, to say it doesn't matter what they mean, it doesn't matter who wrote them, because they are only relevant to what people do themselves, not to what the state does in respect of individuals. And I think that that is a step that maybe we, and I include myself in you, are not ready for, but I think it's an important challenge.
There is something, sorry,
okay.
yeah, there is something I want to tell you. It's just a statement to think of.
Yeah.
Arab free thinkers are considered in their countries in the far left, and they are considered in European context in the far right.
Yes.
Please think about this.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, when I said my organization is No Peace Without Justice, our moderator said, so you must be in the far right. I said, no.
I said neoconservative, because you know neoconservative in America, they say that justice is more important than peace.
Yeah. And I said, hold on, no, I am myself in the far left. I'm much further left than the people who take their instructions from Moscow, you know? But, I mean, there is an issue there where liberal thought in Europe, and I say liberal meaning free thought in Europe, is not part of the left culture. Because the left culture has been... No. In Europe, the liberal free thought is not part of the left culture. It's not. In Europe, the left has been monopolized by the state as the solution for everything, which is the Moscow tradition, which is the opposite of free thought. So be careful. This is important to know. In Europe, the left is not necessarily our ally, because the left belongs to the communist tradition, which doesn't promote free thought, as we know. So, I mean, this is, as I say, power dynamics. We have to be careful about that. In the US, the left is liberal in the sense, and yet is easily purchased by the thought of anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, the guilt, and which becomes very easily relativism. And therefore, you know, each dictator is right because it's their culture. And female genital mutilation is right because it's their culture. And if it's not right, it's because of reasons of hygiene. So you have to do it cleanly. You know, this is something we struggle with UNICEF. We've fought, I mean, my organization has worked on FGM since 2000. The Italians among us know that, I mean, No Peace Without Justice in Italy is known for FGM. And the fight has not been against the circumcisers or the people who cut. It has been against UNICEF, because they wanted to distribute clean razor blades to do it. Because that was identified as the problem, you know? So UNICEF branded razor blade to eliminate the femininity of an individual. This was there. Anyway, three things I didn't know. One, I said it, the issue of how much you're considered homophobe. Two, how much you're still talking about the book. And three, how much work there is still to do ahead, and pledging myself to do the work on your side.
Thank you very much. I will have now, because I don't want to be killed by charming Rhonda, though it could be some kind of perverse pleasure. I don't want to be sentenced to 50, even 50 lashes. Would be too much for me. I was asked to close this session. I'm sorry, I see that a lot of people want still to speak, but it's, I have to do my duty. I'm sorry. I declare this session over, and I wish you, but we can speak each other for coffee, and I wish you a very interesting next debate. I learned a lot in this debate. I have to close it because I've been hired for my discipline, so I want to show you that I have discipline. Thank you very much.
We have 10 minutes coffee break, and then we come back to the next session, and then we will go together.